Okay, hi everybody. We are going to study Daf Yod today, Masechet Eruvin, but we're going to start a few lines from the bottom of Tet Amud Bet. And the case we're discussing is this: if you have a mavoi and you need to put a lechi. So if the lechi is on the inside, everyone agrees that that's fine. Then you can carry it because lechi is primarily for the people that are inside that they can see this. The question is, machloket is if the lechi is on the outside where it can only be seen from the people outside but not the people inside. So conceptually, it would be a reminder also for people outside not to carry in, but that's not the main purpose. So this is subject to a machloket. Rabbi Yochanan was machmir and said this is not a good lechi. Rabbi Chia said it's okay, it is a good lechi. That was the discussion. Now the Talmud is going to compare it to this case. This is a Mishnah much later in the Masechet, which discusses two chatzerot, not a mavoi, but two chatzerot. But there's an analogy here. If you imagine that the mavoi is kind of like this inner one, and the Reshut Rabim is kind of like this outer one. And so here the Mishnah says that one is permitted to carry in this big one, but not in the small one. The reason for that is the big one has mostly walls, and that's important, mostly walls, and it has these two jut outs, so that's the beginnings of a wall. So the rest we can consider like an opening in the wall, like a doorway in the wall. Whereas the inner one, you cannot do that because, yeah, it has three walls, but this entire wall is completely open, and therefore it's missing a whole wall, and so that would be a problem. However, according to this opinion that says something that's on the outside, even though it's only seen from the outside, can serve as a lechi, well, then in this case, it should be allowed to carry on the inside because these walls should be considered good enough to be a post that is like it's on, as if it's on the inside. And therefore, that would allow this to be a doorway also for the inside. So that's the comparison that we're making. And let's see the text. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna, nireh mibachos v'shaveh mifnim nidon mishum lechi. So Rabba, and the son of Rav Huna, that's going to be important who he is. We'll see later on. So in the son of Rav Huna, he is Mekel. He agrees with Rabbi Chia and says that if it can only be seen from the outside, that is perfectly fine. Amar Rabba umotvina nashmatin chaser ketana shnifresa ligdola gedola mutetot nasura mipnei shi kifitha shel gedola. But now we're going to ask a question from this Mishnah, which describes this case. If you think that a lechi that can be seen from outside is good, right, which is what Rabba just said, then this case should be okay. We should consider this like side posts, and therefore this should be allowed. But the Mishnah says it's not. You're not allowed to carry in the little one. So this would seem to this Mishnah would seem to contradict to disprove Rabba's opinion name of his father, Rav Huna. Okay, so now we're going to go through a series of okimtot in order to try to find some way to establish this case, this Mishnah, where it could follow the opinion that bachutz is okay, but still be prohibited. We're going to have to add a lot of okimtot, really like so many that in the end we're going to reject Rabba's opinion. But we have to get there. So so maybe we'll assume that these walls are actually extending outwards, and therefore that doesn't look like a lechi from the outside either, right? And so that's why that's the case here. So it's not a case of looking. If you're right, if it stopped there, it would be okay, but it's extending out. Okay, but still, Rabba could answer. And that's how Rabba answered. The Gemara challenges, according to you, that you say lechi from the outside is okay, looks from the outside is okay, why don't you say lavud, that this, if it's less than 3, then you'd say lavud and says if the space is filled in. And if the space is filled in and this here space is filled in, then it is in fact a lechi that can be seen from outside and it should be okay. So you see the Mishnah does contradict what you say. Rabba could still answer and save himself. תנא רב אדה ברבי מיקה מהד רבי חיה חנינה קטנה בעשר גדולה ב11. So Rabba could try to answer himself and say, oh, there's a lot of space here. That's why you don't say lavud. There's a lot of space here, and you don't say lavud. And that's why this case is not good, because you have the wall jutting out, a lot of space. But here's a big problem. Okay, this baraita is going to be the crux. There is a baraita on this Mishnah that says, this talking about a case where this is 10, the small one is 10, and the big one is 11 amot, side to side. Okay, that's very important. And we have to follow this baraita. That's an authoritative baraita. It'll become clearer as we go along why the baraita says that this is 10 and the big one is 11. But for right now, since the big one is 11, so that means you have one amma is 6 tefachim. So that means you have a half an amma, 3 tefachim on this side, 3 tefachim on that side. If you include the space of the wall, the thickness of the wall, that's less than 3 tefachim, and therefore you have lavud. So since the Mishnah has to follow the interpretation of that baraita that says this is 11, so this should be lavud, and therefore, if you think that lechi from the outside, that you can see from the outside is okay, then you should be permitted. So you see, the Mishnah does contradict what you say, Rabba. Amar Ravina. Ravina is going to come save the day for Rabba and say, let's assume it's a case further that's not centered in the middle, but has less here and more here. And in that case, right, this is why you're not allowed to carry in this area. Yes, you have lavud on one side, right? But not on the other side. So there you go. And and you need 2. So we're going to need more. Okay, fine. You have lavud on one side, so that should be enough. You have 1 lechi, and that's lavud. So forget about this side because this juts out, so it doesn't look like anything. But this, even though it just juts out, we have lavud, and so therefore you should be able to use this 1 lechi and permit carrying inside. So the Mishnah does contradict what you say, Rabba, doesn't it? No, Rabbi Damar Ba'inan Shte Pasin, the Tanya Hasan Ited Bepasihat, Rabbi Omer Bishne Pasin. So Rabbi could still save himself and say that he's following Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's opinion, who requires, in the case of a courtyard like this, requires a pass similar to a lechi, a side post on both sides. And therefore, if we bring all these okimtot together, right, now Rabbi can still explain this Mishnah. I know it has to be 11 here and 10 here, but if the walls are jutting out and it's off center, and I assume you need two pasin, then okay, I could have lavud on one side, but there's no way I'm going to be able to save the other side, and that's why in this case it's prohibited. And the Mishnah says it's prohibited from carrying here. But you're right. If I was lacking any of those conditions, then it would be permitted. Okay, so it's to go through a lot of work in order to allow this Mishnah to follow his opinion, the lenient opinion that says that a lechi that you can see from outside is okay. All right, we did a lot of work, but Gemara is not happy. Hi, Mai. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the opposite. If you think, according to the lenient opinion, the strict opinion, that's the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, that says it has to be seen from the inside of the mavoy. If it's only seen from outside of the mavoy, it's no good. If we follow that assumption, then that Mishnah reads very smoothly, the Mishnah together with the Baraita. Right? It would make sense if the B follows the Rabbi Yosef's opinion. What is the Rabbi Yosef's opinion? I'll show you in the Mishnah. The Lech is Mishnah later on, and a little bit later in the first perek of Eruvin, that says a lechi has to be 10 tefachim high, and their width can be even a tiny bit. But Rabbi Yosef says the width has to be 3 tefachim. Okay, so if we assume that it'd be like Rabbi Yosef, that has to be a width of 3 tefachim, then it all fits together. Forget Rabbi Zera and Rabina that the walls jut out and it's not centered. We don't need any of that. Gedola b'hatesre, mishum derebi saba la kerebi Yosef. So it all fits perfectly together as follows. We'll go back to the plain case. Since we follow the Yosef and we need 3 tefachim on this side and 3 tefachim on that side, and we're following the B that says you need both on both sides. You need something on both sides. Therefore, in a case, this would have to be a case where this is only 10 and this is 11, right? And that would allow for 3 on each side. And yet, the big one is allowed because you have 3 on this side and 3 on that side. You have a beginning of a wall, and this is an opening, and so that's perfectly fine for the outside. The big courtyard. The small courtyard is prohibited because we are saying now that something that's seen from the outside but not from the inside is no good. So if we're machmir on that point, like Rabbi Yochanan, then the Mishnah makes perfect sense. All the stars align. But if you assume the opposite, if you assume that something seen from the outside but not the inside is good, then all this requirement that this has to be 10 and the outside should be 11 that the Baraita says doesn't make any sense. It can't fit no matter what. Ella, iamat nir'em b'chutz v'shavim b'fnim nidon mishum lechi, or d'Rabbi Zera, or Rabbi Na'ita, then you're going to have to add in the assumptions of Rabbi Zera and Rabbi Na, that the walls are jutting out and it's off center. But Rabbi Lasabala, Rabbi Yosef. And you can't possibly follow Rabbi Yosef because if you follow Rabbanan, then even the tiniest bit would be okay. And then in that case, in all these configurations, you would be allowed to carry in here. So we got to assume like Rabbi Yosef, that requires at least 3 tefachim for the side post. So Gedolah b'hatesre lamali, then why would I need the large courtyard to be 11? There'll be no point in that teaching. Either way. What's the point of that Mishnah? If the point of the Mishnah is to teach you that I'm allowed to carry in the big one, I don't need all that. All I need is 10 plus a little bit here and a little bit there, right? Because we're not following the Yosef, then I just need the beginning of a wall, just a tiny bit. And so the Braita could have said 10 plus a tiny bit, plus just 2 tefachim, even less. 10 plus a little bit, that would have been okay. So that configuration doesn't make sense. And if the point of the Mishnah is to teach me that I'm not allowed to carry in an inner courtyard, well then the Baraita should have said that it's talking about a case where this was more than 11, that this was 12 or plus, because if in that case, there's no way I would possibly get 3 tefachim on any one side. In other words, if I have exactly 11, I can get 3 on this side and 3 on that side, and then maybe I could just make it. But if the whole point of the Mishnah is to teach me that this is prohibited, then that Baraita should have said that this outside one is bigger than 11, and that would have made the point much clearer. Okay, finally, we have a conclusion, right? That if it's seen from the outside, but not seen from the inside, it is not a lechi. We are going to be machmir like Rabbi Yochanan against Rabbah, the son of Rav Huna, and against Rabbi Chaya. All right, good. We're lucky we have a conclusion now. Except not so fast. This is actually a fascinating discussion we have here. Rav Yosef, Rav Yosef was a student of Rav Huna. So remember, Rabbah, the son of Rav Huna, taught in his father's name that he's mekel, he's lenient. But Rav Yosef, his student, says, I never heard Rav Huna teach this. Amar le Abaye, who is Rav Yosef's student, right? So the student of Rav Huna says, you did. At amat nihalan, v'ha amat nihalan, you did teach it to us. And you taught it to us about this very case. This happens often in Shas. A lot of times Rav Yosef, in his old age, he forgot his teachings. And then his student, Abaye, would remind him, yes, you taught us this. And this is one of those cases. ואמר רבי רמי בר אבא, אמר רב הונא, לחי המושך עם דפנו של מבוי, פחות מ4 אמות, נידון משום לחי, משתמש עם חודו הפנימי. And the case that, specifically the case you taught was this. If I have a lechi that's very long, comes all the way out like this. If it's less than 4 amot, then it is considered a lechi, and I can carry up until the inner part, the inner edge. If it's 4 amot or more, then nidon mishum mavoy. Then it's not a lechi anymore. This is a mavoy in and of itself. And I cannot carry at all in any of it until I put another lechi. So that's the case. And you, Rav Yosef, you taught us about this case. Shema mina tarat, we can learn 3 things from it, and this is all in the name of, in tradition of Rav Huna. Shema mina ben hayayin asur, ushma mina meshech mavoy ba'arba. We learned 3 things. One is that the space between a lechi in front of a lechi is not allowed to carry, because you said this from the inner edge. And we also learned that the length of mavoy is 4 amot, because if it's more than 4 amot, it's a mavoy in of itself. And we learned the last thing that's relevant to us is if it's seen from outside and not from inside, then it's still good. It's considered a lechi. So you see, the Abba, who said it in his father's name, was correct, and you did, and Rav Huna did teach that to you, and I remember that he taught that to you. All right, what's the final answer? The final answer is we are lenient, and we say this lechi that can be seen from outside only is permitted. It's this good lechi. Now this is very strange because we went through that whole complicated exercise from the Mishnah in Perek Tet, and we rejected it, right? So tiyubta, behilcheta, we rejected that opinion. And now you're telling me that that is in fact the halacha? That's pretty strange. It says, in mishum detane Rabbi Chiya kevate. On yesterday's daf, Rabbi Chiya brought a different baraita, the baraita about the walls that are missing pieces, indentations in the wall. And that baraita permitted, and therefore, although we have a Mishnah here, truth is that this Mishnah, the big and little courtyard, is its only refutation because you have that other baraita that says it's 10 and 11. So it's a baraita against the baraita. And so we have a baraita that says, like Rabbi Chiya, who permits this, and that is the final halacha. Even though we went through that whole exercise to reject it, it still stands. Okay, so that concludes that topic. And now we get to the second topic, which is different strategies for narrowing a wide opening. If an opening is too wide, we'll see how wide is that. Then what is the easiest way to enclose it? So back to the Mishnah, if an alleyway, if mavoy is wider than 10 amot, you got to make it smaller. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't say anything about this case, but the Baraita says that you don't have to. Remember, with the height, Rabbi Yehuda said it can be higher. So too, Rabbi Yosef says it can be wider. So what's the max for Rabbi Yehuda? Do we know what the maximum might be? The maximum would be 13 1/3 cubits. When you get this number 13 1/3, it comes from this case. This is a case where you have a well somewhere, and anywhere in the middle of a Shut Harabim or in the middle of a desert, really. And you want to draw from the well. This was made for pilgrims as they're traveling to Jerusalem, and they want to draw from the well, but they can't because the well is a Shut HaYachid, and then they can't take it out into the public area. So the rabbis have a special law called Paseh Biraot. The next perek will be all about this, in which you simply make corners around it. Here's another picture. You simply make corners right around it, and these are kind of symbolic walls, imaginary walls. And this 13 1/3 comes from measuring the number of animals that would fit through. Okay, so this Paseh Biraot, since that's 13 and a third, so we can learn a Kal Vachomer that the mavoi also it can be as big as 13 and a third. What's this Kal Vachomer? This is Rav Achai that he's promoting. Okay, this is a very important concept, that whenever you have a courtyard, an enclosure, you need there to be more wall than space, right? The majority, counting all the sides, has to be more wall than space. That's true for Chatzer. It's not true for Paseh Biraot, where you only need the corners just a little bit. So if Paseh Biraot, where you said that we can have more space than wall, right? That's the special law of it. Yet you can't have more than 13 and a third space in any one stretch. So mavoi, which is more chamur, and you cannot have more space than wall. So all the more so, you couldn't possibly allow for more than 13 and a third. And even a Yehuda would have to agree with that. That's the proposed Kal Vachomer. However, we reject it. The corners here where you allow more space than wall, so then since there's more space, you have to limit the amount of empty space, only 13 and a third. But mavoi, where you have mostly wall, so you have a compensation. Maybe in that case, you can have bigger spaces. In other words, it's like a law of conservation of spaces. And so you can only, right, this one allows you to have more space, but limited. Whereas a mavoi has to have more wall, but in that case, you can allow for larger stretches. So it's not necessarily, this Kal Vachomer is not necessary. Or the other way around, perhaps this Paseh Biraot is a special case and we're very lenient. And since we're lenient, you can have more space than wall. We're also lenient and you can have bigger areas, bigger stretches of 13 and a third. But perhaps mavoi is stringent on both counts. And such like you have to have more wall than space. You could also you're only allowed smaller stretches. And so the truth is, there's no way to compare these two different laws. They're just too different to prove either way. So in the end, we don't say here what is the Yehuda's max. Although in the beginning of the Masechet, we did say that he learns it from the Hechal, and in that case, that was 20. Okay, so that could be his opinion. All right, very good. Now, a few different strategies about if you have a mavoi that's too wide, what's the easiest way, least expensive, least material, and least effort to enclose it, to make it smaller. About 3 different ways. Taneh Levi, mavoi shura habeslim amma, noes kaneh be'emsaito v'dayo. This is a simple solution. If you have something that's, let's say it's 20 amot wide, and it can only be 10, no problem. All you need to do is put a pole in the middle, and the pole in the middle will be a divider, and then you have 10 here and 10 here, you put a lechi here, lechi there, and you're good to go. So this is a baraita that Levi taught. However, he didn't agree with it himself. But don't follow that baraita. Even though I taught it, don't follow it. This is in contrast to yesterday, where we saw Rabbi Chia taught a baraita, and we inferred if he taught it, that means he agrees with it. But even if he teaches it, but says, I don't agree with it, okay, then he doesn't agree with it. Shemuel says it in the name of Levi, another version, but either Levi said himself or we heard it from Shemuel in the name of Levi. So that's not a good solution. We can't just put a pole in the middle. Here's solution number 2. What you do is you need something bigger. It has to be 10 high and 4 amot deep. And so if it's goes 4 amot into the mavoi, then, right, we saw this halakha a few times, this becomes a mavoi in and of itself. And so I have one mavoy that's less than 10, and another mavoy here that's less than 10. And so that's, I can't just put a pole, but it has to extend in 4 amot. And so this is be a fine solution.
Rabbi, according to the Braita,
Yeah.
do you need a lehi, or would you say that the pole is enough of a heker?
Well, you certainly need a lechi somewhere. You need at least one lechi, right? And if the whole point of the pole is that it's splitting it, then you need 2 lechis.
And you could say that the pole acts as a lehi because the pole is not 0 width.
Oh, that's a good point. Maybe the pole can act as both a divider, and if it extends over to one side sufficiently or noticeably, it can be a lechi. Maybe you need it to be also, jut out. But it looks like the pole just divides. You need some kind of sign, right? That's a good point. Okay, so we got the second one. Iname, now the third one, which we're going to discuss for a bit. Iname ked Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yehuda, mavoy shurahab hamesh esre amma. Let's say it's 15. I need to fill in 5. Malchik shte amot, v'oseh pas shalosh amot. So no problem. Malchik shalosh. So you go leave a space of 2, and you have a wall of 3. Now, obviously, if it's 15 wide and they put a full wall of 5, obviously that's it. Everybody agrees that that's fine, because then I filled it in and now you have 10. But we're looking for the least possible material and work. And so that's what he's saying here. Since we know it has to be more wall than space, okay, so that's good to have 3 here and 2 here. Obviously, if the 3 was on this side, the 3 here, then the 2 would just be 12 space, right? That's no good. But this configuration, right? 3 here, 2 here, there's more wall than space, and Rav Yehuda says this is a good solution. Okay. Now the Gemara is going to ask a few questions on this, like maybe there's other arrangements, other variants that we could use. Why did he say this, 2 and then 3? Why didn't he say something more like this, where they take that 2 and put it in the middle between 1.5 and 1.5. So you still have 3 wall altogether, but you're splitting it into 2 parts, 1.5, 2, and then 1.5. And maybe this would be better because it's you see like a more, maybe visually it's kind of like more wall space. Anyway, why didn't he say this? Why did he put all the 3 together over there? Right. So Shema Mina. Omed merubel parutz. Yeah, so make sure I'm in the right place. Right? Okay, good. So perhaps we can derive from here that Rav Yehuda thinks that when we say that the wall has to be more than the space, the wall has to be more than the space when the wall has to be together. If the wall is divided and each of half is less than the space, it's no good. The wall that's more than the space, there can't be any space that's more than any part of the wall. And that's why he said it has to be 3 together and then 2. Perhaps that's why he gave that configuration and not this one. No, we reject that. No, maybe he does think that it can be separated like that. But the problem with this is a different problem altogether, which is that you have space on this side and space on this side. And so therefore, it's really the space that's going to take over. And this is going to feel like nothing. It's kind of like an order of operations. Now, if you start from here and you have, okay, wall, that's good. Some space, okay, wall. So, this by itself would be okay if it was partitioned off in some way. But, when you're looking at it from this direction, you have all this space and more space than wall. That's the problem here, that these can't join up. The space overpowers, and that is what's at issue here. Right. Okay, so that's where we leave that option. But now another suggestion. Omed keparus asur. Why didn't he say this solution? Have 1 space 1 space 1, and all of them are 1, right? And this could look nice, kind of like a fence, and you wouldn't, no big spaces here. So why didn't he say this? Must be that Rav Yehuda thinks that if it's equal in size, it's no good. That you have to have the wall, of course, the total wall has to be more than the total space, but furthermore, that any piece of wall has to be bigger than the piece of space next to it. Maybe that's why he didn't say that option. No, we say not necessarily. Perhaps it's the same problem that we said before, because there's a lot of space here, and there is some space here, and that's equal to it. So then this one gets swallowed up in the space around it, and that's the problem, right? If it was a different configuration, if this was small, this was the wall was here, and then this would be okay. But that's the problem here. But otherwise, theoretically, you could have 1, 1, 1, 1, as long as you didn't have a big space next to it. Okay, good. Wait, so I have another configuration that will solve all the problems that we had before. We take we put the one space of 1 here, and then we put 1.5, and then 1, and then 1.5. And you see, now we won't have a problem that this will get swallowed up, because this is bigger than the space that's next to it. And so, right, what would be wrong with this configuration? Why didn't Rav Yehuda say like this? Why did he put this 1.5 over and all the space altogether here? And we answer, you're right, that would be perfectly fine in that case, except that it's more work to make 2 boards, easier to make 1 bigger board. All right, but both of those cases would be fine. And now maybe a different consideration that we would have with that original scenario where we had 2 and with the 2 here. What if the problem is that this is the entrance way? What if people want to take a little shortcut and go in this way? And that would be a problem, because if people get used to walking in here, then this becomes a regular pathway, and it's hard to make a legal fiction that this is enclosed when people are walking through it all the time. People will not go in the bigger area, and they'll go into the smaller area. No, we know people's psychology. We have a hazakah. We know that people always go into the bigger space, and they're not going to squeeze in to a smaller space. Everybody likes a bigger door. Wait, how's this different from, if you remember some time back, we saw a case like this, where if you have a hole on the side of the wall, if it's too close to the front, right, then this is no good, because although this is an entrance, people are said that walking from here, they're going to start going into this entrance. And so this is a big problem. I mean, so you have to have a large span of wall here, otherwise this is a problem. So you see, we are worried about people going into a shortcut, even though it's smaller. So how is this different? In this case, it is actually a shortcut. It's shorter to go in here than to have to go all the way around. But in our case of this one, this is not really a shortcut. You're coming in here, and so it's the same thing to go this way or that way. And so therefore, we're not worried that people are going to go in the small one. They're certainly going to go into the big one. Okay, and now last case of the day is a toilet seat cover, which they had made out of leather. Tenan hatam. Od al-asla behalal shelo mistarfin betefach. Asla, often spelled with an aleph, comes from sela in Greek. It means a seat, a chair, and it looks just like this. Okay, so you have a bit of chair with, let's say it's just a tefach big, it's kind of small, but if we had something like this with a hole inside, and the case of the Mishnah is, you have this on a stand. Underneath, let's say there was a piece of a dead body, which causes tum'ah as a tent. So anything else under it, you have a bowl under there, the bowl will become tameh also. But that's only true if this is a tent, and it's only a tent if it's at least a tefach wide. The question is, what about the hole? Can we disregard the hole and assume that this is all a tefach of a tent? Or does the hole matter? How big is the hole, right? And how much leather does there have to be around it? So we're going to see two opinions. So we said here that the leather and the hole can join together to make up a tefach, and it will be a tent. What is this thing? It's the leather covering of the toilet seat. Now, how big can the hole be? Two opinions. If you have two finger, right, a tefach is 6 finger widths. So if you had 6 finger widths, and you have 2 leather over here, 2 finger widths of space, 2 finger widths. This would not really be used as good as a toilet, more theoretical, right? But 2 finger width leather back here, then that's fine, because you have more leather than space. And so it all joins together. That's Rav Dimi. He says 1.5, 1 and 1.5. What's that up to? 1.5 plus 1 plus 1.5? 4. Only 4 finger worths. Still sounds like the same idea. You have 1.5. 1.5, that's more than the space. So you have more leather than space. Okay, now we're going to analyze, is there a difference between these, or are they just two variants? Amale Abaye Rav Dimi. Mi peligitu. Abaye asks Rav Dimi, the one who said the first opinion, are you arguing with Rabin, or are you just giving 2 different scenarios, but you agree in principle? We are in agreement. The reason why we have different number of fingers is because we're using different fingers. If you use a pinky finger, it's thinner. So a tefach is 6 pinky fingers. That's what I was using. I said 2, 2, and 2. Whereas Rabin was using thumbs. And thumbs, only 4 thumbs is what you need to make up a tefach. And so he was talking about thumbs, and that's why he gave his dimensions as 1.5, 1, and 1.5. But we agree in principle. That's what Avdimi told Abaye. Abaye didn't buy it. Abaye said, no, but there's more than that. There's another difference in what you said. Amale lai lae peligitu. No, you are arguing. You know what you're arguing about? That principle that we mentioned above, that if what is standing is more than the opening, but it's from 2 sides. And so in this case, if I have 2 and then 2 and then another 2, so I have to join together the 2 outer ones in order to be the majority over the whole. And you think that that's okay. You say you can agree, you can join together the 2 sides to make up a majority of what's there over the space. Rabin would not join the 2 sides together. That's why he says it has to be 1.5 and then 1 and then another 1.5, so that any side by itself, 1.5 will be more than the 1 in the middle. See, I think there is an important principle behind what you are arguing. And Abaye says, I'm going to prove it to you. If you're going to insist that you're not arguing, that for Rabin, right, the second opinion, he should have given a different scenario. He should have, fine, he's saying 4 because he's using thumbs. Okay, fine. Should have said 1 1/3, 1 1/3, 1 1/3. And then that would have been in total agreement with you. But the fact that he changed it and made the outer ones bigger means that he is a little bit more stringent and doesn't want to join the sides together, right? Sounds like a good point. So Rav Dimi responds, Elamai piliginan, what, you think we're arguing? If I thought that that it doesn't have to be bigger on the sides. I could have given a different scenario altogether. It's ba ushne shilishi. If I thought that you can join the sides, right? Then I would have given a different scenario of 1 2/3 on one side, 1 2/3 on the other side. It's ba'ayim ushne shilishim berevach be'emsa, and 2 2/3 on the inside, right? That would still add up to 6, and that would be an even more striking case where the 1 2/3 on the side, the space is bigger because that's 2 2/3. The space is bigger than either of the one side. Yet, if you think that I think that you can join the sides to the edges together, right? Then I should have said that scenario, but I didn't. Instead, I said 2, 2, and 2. So you see, that's not my principle. I don't think that. But you're right. If you insist that we are arguing, we could be arguing about a different case, which is when the hole is as big as any of the sides. That's where we're arguing. Where the first opinion of Rav Dimi, says 2, 2, and 2, says that's okay, right? Because even though they're equal size, I can get all the leather together and they'll still be the majority. Whereas Rabin said I cannot have them of equal size, but any individual part also has to be bigger than the space next to it. And that is in fact something that we may be arguing on, how much that the majority still of leather still has to be there. And we will conclude with that and allow the issue to stand there. Baruch Adonai Olam, amen, amen. Thank you, everybody.